Hi everyone, this is Gerard Simpson and welcome to my channel, Power Fanatic. This is a follow-up video on the Power Apps game I built called How to Feed Your Dragon. In this video I will step through the remainder of the app build. Let's get stuck in and I hope you enjoy it. In the last video I gave a demo of each game, covered the high level build elements in terms of the game structure and app level expressions, and also went in a bit deeper into the mechanics of the game Veg Your Bets, the first game. In this video, I will first of all cover off the use of timers and audio and their place in the game sequence, and then dive into the mechanics of the remaining two games, Take 5 and Total Recall. So for timers and audio, on the welcome screen, there's one audio player on the screen for the background music, which is set to auto start on visible. And it's simply reset when navigating away and coming back to the screen. I covered the timers shown here in the first video, which handle the border color animation in the buttons and also the star shape fill transparency, so I'll not go into them in any more detail. With regards to the games, very similar timer and audio patterns are used for all three, so we'll just take a look at Veg Your Bets as an example. So for the timers on Veg Your Bets, I covered the shuffle timer off quite a bit in video 1, but for the other timers, we have one for the start, one for the gameplay phase, and then one for the finishing phase. And a series of variables are used to control them as follows. So on select of the game button on the home screen sets a variable var catch start to true. This variable is leveraged in the start property of the timer VYB start. So selecting the game button starts this timer. This variable is also used in the visible property of the scroll and the text and the icons in the starting phase, i.e. setting it to true makes these controls visible and conversely hides them. This timer runs for 15 seconds and then on timer end, the variable var catch run is set to true, which is in the start property of timer VYB run. The var catch run variable also controls the visibility of the game elements, i.e. the galleries. Then on timer end of timer VYB run, we reset the shuffle timer, we reset the run timer with reset self, we reset the main game music, we set the run variable back to false, we set the finish variable to true, which runs the finishing / outro phase, and then we add the player's score to the collection which is used in the overall leaderboard. Along each step, the respective timers are reset and variables are set to false to allow them to be triggered to true the next time round. With regards to audio, we have three main audio elements in each game: the main game music, a success sound, and a failure sound. The main game music is controlled by the var catch run variable, where the start property of the main music audio player is set to that variable. So when the variable is set to true, the music starts. The success and failure sounds are addressed via an if statement in the on timer start property of each timer veg drop as shown. So this checks to see what type of barrel sits at the bottom of the lane selected. If it's an open barrel, the positive sound is played by triggering var veg bar noise to true, which is included in the start property of the respective audio. And on the other hand, if the barrel is closed, var splat noise is set to true, which triggers the splat audio player. Very similar rationale is used for the timers and audio in the other two games, the only exception being Total Recall, where I've introduced a further timer to handle the showing and hiding of the veg. You can also see here that variables have been used extensively, with some variables simultaneously fulfilling three roles, i.e. starting timers, starting music, and controlling visibility of certain controls. So it's another great example of how useful and how powerful variables are. So in terms of the other games, Take 5 and Total Recall, they're very similar in terms of the presentation and logic, with just some slight differences in Total Recall. So we'll cover Take 5 in detail. For the controls in Take 5, the biggest difference you see here from Veg Your Bets is the use of a symmetrical grid as part of the main game experience. This is a vertical gallery with the wrap count and the gallery template height influenced by the var difficulty variable that you'll recall from the first video. So i.e. the wrap count is set to the variable number property, and the gallery template height is set as the gallery height divided by the same number property. The total number of items is set by the total property in that same difficulty variable, and this then results in a perfectly symmetrical grid regardless of the difficulty selection taken at the start of the game. Point to note also is this gallery is bound to a collection called Call 100 IMGs, 100 images, which is all scaled up and randomized from the original Call 10 Veg collection of just 10 vegetables. I'll come on to that in more detail shortly. Inside the gallery we have an image and an icon. The image sits on top and is selectable in the game. The icon is used just to show the success of collecting the correct vegetable, with its visibility set to true if this item.value is in the call match game collection and its image matches the image veg choice shown on the right hand side. This logic is reversed for the image, so the image disappears when those conditions resolve to true. So for the main game logic, unlike Veg or Bets, where the main game expression was triggered by the timer, the shuffle timer, the main game expression in Take 5 is triggered when the player successfully takes 5 vegetables, i.e. 5 matching vegetables. At this point the main game logic is triggered and the grid is regenerated. So before diving into this expression, I just want to touch on the objective and the challenge. So I wanted the game to generate a new grid of vegetables each time the player successfully matches 5. I wanted to generate this larger grid from the initial collection of just 10 in Call 10 Veg, and then I also wanted the grid to be totally random each time. So let's remind ourselves what the initial collection looks like. So this is the Call 10 Veg base collection, and this is the starting point for our grid. So in terms of the main logic, it's handled in the onSelect property of the image control in the main gallery. There's quite a bit here, but you'll see it's not too difficult and contains quite a lot of repetition. So first we are collecting this item.value. Then we check what the value is so we can play the correct sound, i.e. success if the value is 1 to 5, or splat if not. Then the second if statement checks if all values 1 to 5 are in the call match game collection, i.e. has the player matched all the vegetables. If not, the expression ends here. But if all 5 values are in the collection, the grid generation aspect kicks in. And this kicks off with creating a random single column collection between 1 and 10 called call tr rand veg. Then 8 variables are set, 1 from each of the first 8 rows in that randomized collection. These variables are used further on in the expression. The next step is where the collection is scaled up, and this is where the var difficulty .total property comes into play. The total property is used in a sequence function, creating either 36, 64 or 100 rows, subject to the difficulty level chosen, and that is shuffled and collected into the call 100 collection. Next, we reshape this collection by adding an image column. We populate that column with an image from the original Call 10 Veg collection, which has a corresponding value matching the value in the variable var rand veg1. This is all collected into the Call 100 images collection, which is bound to the main gallery. But at this point, we have an identical image in all the rows of the image column. So how do we then add and randomize more images in the collection? Well, now we leverage an update if on the Call 100 images to randomize the images. The update if has 7 conditions and corresponding updates, i.e. for rows with values 1 to 5, it goes off and checks the value in the second variable var rand veg2, looks up the base collection of Call 10 Veg for the image on the row of the matching value to that variable, and then updates the relevant rows in the image column of the Call 100 images collection. The update if continues to cycle through each other row in the expression, repeating the same steps. And if you recall, the expanded collection is shuffled, so if you can visualize, the values 1 to 5 are scattered throughout the collection, as is 6 to 10, 11 to 15, etc., as are their newly updated vegetable images. And this is how the random aspect is achieved. Values 1 to 5 in the collection also represent the vegetable we were looking for, with other vegetables having values 6 to 35 just provided to mix the grid up, and then values 36 to 100, subject to the difficulty, remain as the initial vegetable type assigned when the vegetable column was created during the expression. Now, I'm sure you're thinking this is quite a meaty expression, and you're right, there's a lot going on here. And I can think of a couple of ways to refine this, which I may do in the future, but I've left as it is for now because it works fine and the performance doesn't seem to be affected. With regard to other controls, the vegetable shown under the barrel sign, which has to be matched, that just uses the same var rand veg2.value figure to again look up call 10 veg, i.e. matching the vegetable in rows with values 1 to 5 in the expanded call 100 images collection. All the other controls and behaviours are very similar to veg your bets, so have been covered off before. Moving on to total recall. As I said, this uses a very similar approach to Tech 5. The main difference here is that we show but then hide the grid after a few seconds, and the player has to remember the locations of the vegetables. To achieve this, we have just slotted another phase between the starting phase and the game run phase, and it has its corresponding variable and timer, tr show veg. In the gallery, we have the image at the back, then we have the label with the question mark, and then we have the icon on top. The visibility of the label is set to not var tr show veg, so when it flips to false, the label visibility is true, i.e. masking the vegetables during the game run phase. Then to achieve the clicking effects of vegetables appearing, albeit through either a green or grey filter, I'm actually adjusting the colour and fill transparency of both the label and the icon, where the icon goes to semi-transparent green fill and white, or grey fill and white, subject to the selection. Conversely, the transparency of the fill and colour on the label is switched to 0, which makes it invisible when a selection is made. For the remainder of this game, everything else about the game logic, controls, etc. is just like Tech 5, so that essentially covers it. So just before I wrap it up, I mentioned on the August Power Apps community call that it took me quite a while to build this app, which is true. But the thing I didn't mention was that the most time-consuming part was spent scouring resources, trying to find the right media for the game, and then messing about with the theme, the layout, design, all on the fly as I went through the build. This was very much an unplanned build, just for fun, and to enter into the Power Apps demo extravaganza. So whilst it was fun, it maybe wasn't the most efficient build. Hopefully I've demonstrated that the actual mechanics of the game are quite straightforward. So if I were to build this now from scratch, knowing what I know now, it could easily be done in a day. Even if you didn't have the correct resources in terms of media, images and sounds, you could just add placeholder media and then swap them out when you've found the material that suits your theme. Anyway, that's probably enough for me. The next time round I plan to cover a more BizApps scenario, which will be just as much fun as I had with this game, fingers crossed. Many thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in the next video.